Happy New Year! Today is the 1st of January 2022. That's the future. That's like beyond the future of Blade Runner, beyond the future of Back to the Future, all sorts of, anyway. What I do know about 2022 is this is going to be an amazing year of walking. And we're starting with something a little bit special, a location I can't believe that I haven't filmed before. It's, anyway, it's one of those things, and we're going to do as much of it as we can today, on New Year's Day. I'm very slowly walking towards the first location, a series of old medieval buildings, and we'll be picking up more of the incredible stories and the mysteries that lie just beyond the walls of the City of London. Today's walk's going to have a bit of everything. It's going to have medieval buildings, some of the oldest buildings in the whole of London. We've got a lost river, we've got wells, we've got all sorts of stuff, and we've got some great stories as well. But first, the first place, right? So our first location is the Charterhouse. The Charterhouse of London, or the original Charterhouse of London, which is this building here, or a series of buildings that were first established in 1348. So originally the land was obtained as a burial place for victims of the Black Death. And it's estimated that up to 40,000 people were buried here before the establishment of the first monastery. It's quite a grim thought. That first Carthusian monastery was established as a hermitage, so the monks lived in solitary confinement in a cell, and the water was piped down from Islington, from Barnsbury, actually from the White Conduit House, which is at the end of my Little Italy walk. I'll post the link to that below. And helpfully, just inside this little pagoda here, it gives us a very sort of like potted history of the people associated with Charterhouse Square and the Charterhouse. And it says here, in 1370, Sir Walter Many founded the Carthusian monastery that gave Charterhouse its name. Around here we have the coat of arms of Edward I, Baron North, and here it tells us that in 1545 North bought the despoiled Charterhouse monastery and rebuilt the site as a large house. Here we have the coat of arms of Thomas Howard, 4th Duke of Norfolk, who bought the house in 1564 and lavishly extended it to become Howard House, a ducal mansion. Basically, finally, Thomas Sutton here, who bought Howard House in 1611, turned it into a charity school and an almshouse for the poor, some of which is what it still exists as today. And Thomas Sutton was said to be the richest commoner in the whole of England. Very, very wealthy man indeed, whose name you see all around the place, really. The priory came to quite a grisly end at the hands of Henry VIII when he took over the Church of England. The prior here, a guy called John Houghton, refused to accept Henry VIII as head of the church. Henry VIII was not a man known for his reasonable debate and discussion on such matters of his authority, so he took Houghton, the prior, and 3 other monks, and they were dragged upside down through the streets to Tyburn. That's about 4 miles. And there they were half hung, disemboweled, and each had 1 limb each severed from their bodies. And Houghton's arm was nailed to the front gate of Charterhouse. And I suppose not that long after that, those events took place. This is where Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, prepared for her coronation. And she spent about 5 days here. And in that time, massive crowds gathered outside in Charterhouse Square, waiting for their new queen. It has various uses today. There are still people living here in the almshouses, although there's offices here, there's a medical school here, part of Bart's Hospital, and various other things, I believe. So now over the cobbled streets we go to walk along the course of a lost and mostly forgotten river. The Faggerswell Brook, I'm probably not even pronouncing that right, it's got various names. The Faggerswell Brook, the Frackers Brook, runs along just the north side of Smithfield down into the River Fleet. And it's a river that you don't really hear talked about in the Lost Rivers. I'm not sure if it makes it into either Barton's books or Tom Bolton's books. So we're going to follow a bit of that now. I love a lost river, as you know. Who's that character up there? Anyone know? It's not a green man, is it? So he's got a slightly, I don't know, godlike look about him. And there's this character here next to him. This is a beautiful looking pub here in Charterhouse Street. What's it called? The Fox and Anchor, which is a slightly strange name, isn't it? So here we have the famous Smithfield Meat Market. There's been a live cattle market on this site since the 10th century, which is incredible. And I think the butchering of meat and the buying of butchered meat has taken place here for over 800 years. It's quite a famous, well, it's a very famous spot. And I think it's the largest market of its type in Europe, certainly in an urban setting. Anyway, it's constantly facing closure and demolition, and I believe that actually there are now plans to move it out east to Barking, but the fate of the buildings is still very much up in the air. Developers have been trying to knock this down for about 20 years and build a block of offices on it. Thankfully, there's quite a spirited campaign to save it. These buildings date from, I think, the 1860s. I'll put the date on the screen. And Smithfield still supplies the restaurants and the butchers of London to this day. A really wonderful institution. And there's a network of tunnels beneath here that were originally used to bring the cattle into the market, into slaughter, which I think now are just used for storage. This is the most old red telephone boxes I've seen in one place together. There's 6 in a row. The history of all the other fantastic history of Smithfield on the other side there around St Bart's is in another video, which I'll link to below. It's part 2 of my City of London Churches walk. A place, the smooth field, Smithfield, a place of trading, a place of frivolity and celebration, and also a place of quite gruesome execution. William Wallace and a fellow called John Rogers the Martyr. So I tend to pass through Smithfield a little bit more speedily than other areas of London. Still saw about that execution in 1555. So these streets here, Cowcross Street and St John's Street, these were streets that in the medieval period and right up to the 1860s were where the cattle was led to market here, and some of that cattle had made extraordinarily long journeys, and they were brought down and fattened on the fields of Islington before making this final journey to market here. And that stopped in the 1860s, and the cattle market moved north to just off of Caledonian Road, and we'll go there in a future video. I'll post the link below to a blog post about it all that I wrote quite some years ago now. It's not all just old history here. You've got Fabric, quite a famous nightclub just there facing the market, and that would have been on the banks of the Faggerswell Brook that would have run along here, along Charterhouse Street, down there into the River Fleet. And it's marked on the maps of London in the time of Henry II in the 12th century. But it seems to have been completely erased from the memory of London. And just behind this rather nondescript looking, quite new looking wall here, we have a kind of quite a rarity here, an open section of the tube, where the tube runs above ground. On that side there, you've got the City of London, the Corporation of London, who owns Smithfield Market. On this side here, I'll put an arrow on the screen maybe, this side here is the London Borough of Islington, and we're going to walk up one of the oldest streets of Islington, or some of the oldest streets of Islington. We don't know exactly how old they are. When we were on Old Street a couple of weeks ago, Old Street we know was at least used by the Romans, and it's believed was much older. Still, we don't really know how old St John's Street are, or Cowcross Street, but they certainly appear on the medieval maps of Norman London, in the 1100s, and there's been Roman fragments, sort of pottery fragments and coins and stuff found around here, so it's not known whether this might have been part of the Roman street plan, the roads leading up to Islington, up to the hills of Islington. St John's Street now has become quite fancy. Started getting gentrified in the 90s, and it's where there's some sort of quite posh restaurants, and you've got lots of offices up there. I think it's sort of a bit of a hub for the design industry and architects and things like that. There might be a few advertising agencies around here as well, that kind of thing. So we're just going to head up the ancient St John's Lane to one of the oldest built structures in London. Yes, and it is every bit as incredible as that sounds. It doesn't disappoint, it doesn't let you down. So here it is, St John's Gate, once originally part of the medieval Priory of St John, home of the Order of St John, the Knights Hospitallers of Jerusalem. And this actual structure here was built in 1504. Obviously the monastery, the priory, was sacked a couple of times. We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll go around the corner to the site of the priories. This is rather being detached from the site of the original priory. It's had quite an illustrious history. At one point there was a tavern attached here that was owned by Hogarth's dad, where apparently everyone had to speak Latin. Ed Glinert, in his wonderful London Compendium, where I'm sourcing some of this information today, he notes that of course it was a failure. It was also where the Gentleman magazine was founded, and among the staff there was Dr. Johnson, author of the dictionary. We talked about him in the previous video, didn't we? So it's quite an illustrious part of London. I really love this. It really feels like medieval London comes alive. So the Priory of St John was established in 1144 by a French knight, and it went on to become one of the most powerful institutions in the whole of London, a rival to the famous Knights Templar. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, the way that the same sort of mystery that we associate with the Knights Templar hasn't been attached to the Priory of St John. And in my previous video we saw the way that the Priory of St John took over the temple, the inner and the middle temple, the temples just off of Fleet Street after the disbandment of the Knights Templar. The Priory of St John, the Knights Hospitaller of Jerusalem, set out from the Crusades. Earlier in the 12th century, the Patriarch of Jerusalem came here to implore Henry II to launch a crusade, which he refused. I mean, the Patriarch offered his head to Henry, which I thought would have been a dicey thing to do. Luckily for him, it was not long after the murder of Thomas à Becket, so I think Henry probably had his fill of killing off monks and bishops and so such like, particularly a Patriarch of Jerusalem. So it's a really storied location. The Priory of St John was ransacked during the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 because they believed that King Richard's treasurer, Bob the Robber, was here. In one account I've heard that he was here and he was dragged out into the street and executed. And here we have the wonderful Jerusalem Tavern. It dates from 1720 and it's a really wonderful pub. It is a very small pub, I will say that, and they do a lovely pint of it was St Peter's Brewery, which is a Suffolk brewery. I don't know if it still is. Really wonderful ales, and I think that's another place where Dr. Johnson's said to have drunk. Quite a few pubs that claim that, and Probably correctly so as well. We haven't got a great deal of light left, so we're not going to have time to do a properly comprehensive tour of Clerkenwell. So maybe I should leave the Clerkenwell Green stuff to another video, and I'll just pick up 2 further references that I'm really keen to include. I don't think anyone would forgive me if I didn't show you the site of the Clerk's Well that gives Clerkenwell its name, even though that is in my River Fleet video. And then I think we should go to the church. I'm trying to remember, I think it's St Thomas's, isn't it, which is like the parish church of Clerkenwell. And we'll do the kind of Clerkenwell, oh actually I'm saying that, we'll do the Clerkenwell Green and marks and all of that, but here it is, it's right here on the way to the Clerk's Well, so we have to do this here. Clerkenwell Road here is sort of more or less a continuation of Old Street, and I believe it's part of that ancient road that linked Silchester to Colchester, at least Roman, possibly even older, if not probably even older. And here we have the Marks Memorial Library. So I really have dropped a clanger here. I know I've dropped a lot of clangers in my videos, and I've probably dropped quite a few in this video here, but I think this is just about the biggest clanger I think I've dropped. That is not the Marks Memorial Library, that's the Clerkenwell Old Sessions House, and I feel like I should know what the Marks Memorial Library looks like. I've walked past that building so many times over the last 20 years and gone, oh, that's the Marks Memorial Library there, and it's not. And the Marks Memorial Library is right nearby, and guess what? I film most of the buildings around Clerkenwell Green, and there's not a single shot, clear shot, of the Marks Memorial Library. So just pretend in your mind's eye either that this is that building, or that the information is still, I think, okay. It's just, it's not that building. It's a that's a different building. I apologise for that, and apologise for this interruption, but I felt like it required this level of intervention. Anyway, on with the video. Originally built as a Welsh charity school in the 18th century. This area has very strong Welsh associations due to the cattle that used to be brought here from Wales. Lots of Welsh people ended up settling in these fields around Islington, establishing dairies and such around here. And then after that it became various things. There was a printing press here established by William Morris, would you believe? He bought the building. And then it was where Lenin came in 1902. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin came here in 1902 and published the Bolshevik newspaper, The Spark. Itskva or something in Russian. It's a tiny room in there, and apparently the printing press that Lenin used is still there inside. And here we have Clerkenwell Green, and its radical roots stretch right back to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. It's where the northern protesters, this is where they camped before the sacking of the Priory of St John. I've got my copy of Ed Glinert's London Compendium in my hand. And its radical sort of tradition carried on. This was actually where the mystery plays and mummers plays and performances would happen. Actually, due to the, not so much that this would have been an open kind of field, but you had the Skinner's Well just up by the church there, as well as the Clerk's Well right on the banks of the River Fleet at the bottom of the hill here. We'll go there next. And people used to gather around the wells and springs and perform these Christian mystery plays out here in the fields. It's a really wonderful idea, isn't it? And this became the site of many kind of radical speeches and gatherings, the Chartists and all sorts of other people calling for reform, for more democracy, more liberty. These are all things that we kind of, I think, sort of slightly take for granted now, don't we? So this is Clerkenwell Close, and this road here would have once wound through the grounds of the medieval nunnery that was here. It's one of the institutions that's on that 12th century map of London, along with the Priory of St John. So it's obviously a very important institution. And it was in the grounds of St Mary's that there was another important well, the Skinner's Well. And I think it's somewhere associated with the church here, St James's Church. So we'll just walk around the edge of St James's, because I believe the Skinner's Well was towards the west side of the churchyard. It's interesting, the antiquarians, even writing in the 18th century, talk about the Skinner's Well being totally lost. But in the medieval period, it was every bit as important as the Clerk's Well. The Three Kings pub, that was a fine pub. I haven't been in there actually for some time, probably about 10 years actually. That was somewhere I used to come and drink in Clerkenwell occasionally. More drink outside it, to be honest with you, difficult to get inside. So we have to conclude this walk around Clerkenwell, through the mysteries and the well, literally mysteries, because of the mystery plays, you see. I'm not overusing that word. So we must conclude this walk down at the Clerk's Well. Even, like I say, it's been in a previous video, but that matters not. How could we come to Clerkenwell and not visit the Clerk's Well? It's just down the hill here, just right on the banks of the submerged River Fleet. So here we have the site of the Clerk's Well, which gives its name to the area, Clerkenwell. Apparently the EN on the end is of Anglo-Saxon origin. And Clerkenwell is recorded as far back as the 12th century. It probably goes back even further than that, when there were quite a number of wells and springs all around Islington, and we will cover more of them in future videos. We've covered many of them in the River Fleet video. It was a very important place in medieval London, a place of frivolity and celebration, a place of performance and play, and a perfect place to end our walk. I believe the well, or something approximating the well, can be seen through this grate here. I did look through here many years ago in daylight, when I used to walk past here all the time. Well, thank you for joining me on that wonderful walk through Clerkenwell, through these incredible stories. Some of them quite gruesome, aren't they, when you think back to it. If you want to know more about this area, and by word, I've missed out so much. There's so much to take in about Clerkenwell and Smithfield and all of that. I'll link to previous videos I've made below about the River Fleet, about Little Italy, about Smithfield and St Bart's and all of that. But I also highly recommend the London Compendium by Glinert, and also Rebel Footprints by David Rosenberg. And in David Rosenberg's book, there's literally a mapped walk with the points on it. Actually, it takes in some of the Little Italy stuff as well. So I will link to those books also below. And once again, Happy New Year, the 1st of January. I think that's quite a good start to 2022, isn't it? And I've got so many great walks planned for this year. I mean, we're going to obviously branch out beyond the city and beyond. We're going to go all sorts of places this year. I'm so excited. I'm so looking forward to it. I feel really optimistic about the year ahead. So I hope you're taking care and staying well. And as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you in the next walk, wherever that may be. But it'll be in 2022. We're in 2022. Amazing.